back, everybody. I am so excited for this topic. Why is it hard to break up with alcohol? The number one thing that people ask me is, how do I stay sober? How do I stay sober? And I can't say there's like a magic bullet for everybody, right? Like this one thing you do. But having awareness and understanding the complexities of alcohol and mindset and culture and global beliefs are so important because what we've seen our whole life shapes us to some degree. It does not mean we're trapped and we can't change, but we have to understand what's going on in order to change. So I also want to do just a quick plug. I'm not a doctor or psychiatrist. Along this journey, you might find you need extra help. A lot of people do get help with sobriety, whether it's a support group, a coach, therapist. There's other things like a psychiatrist or doctor you might need to see as well. Because when we remove alcohol, yes, it's great, but there's a part I feel like a lot of people go through that's not great because you're not relying on the thing that you've been relying on for a really long time. So I really want to normalize getting mental health help. And part of this journey is to trust your gut. If you don't think you can do all of it by yourself, it's not because you're weak. It's because there's things that we just don't know. We're not all good at everything, right? We need help from other people. That's the one thing I have learned is get help. So I want to just dive into the science briefly, very briefly. I'm not going to go into too much about the science around alcohol. I would highly, highly encourage you to do this though, because if we don't know what's up with alcohol, it's just one complexity that we're not going to be able to understand it. Alcohol really kind of creates havoc on so much stuff. And so it's important to actually have a good baseline. And I'll link a few books below, as well as my Facebook group. It's for women. So if you want to join it, I'd love to have you. But I want to just tell you that alcohol just isn't psychologically addictive. It's chemically addictive. So according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, alcohol is considered one of the 5 most addictive drugs to the human brain, more addictive than nicotine and methamphetamines. And then only heroin and cocaine rank as more addictive than alcohol. So I also believe this is the only substance, well, not only, but the most legal substance that we blame the person, not the substance. Now, I don't condone drinking and driving, of course, or unsafe behaviors or anything of that nature. But I think it's the substance that we blame the person, and the person feels like, I can't tell anybody. I feel shameful. I'm hiding my alcohol. I'm hating myself. I'm judging myself. What's wrong with me? Oh my God, what would everyone think of me? And, I really want to normalize that sobriety has changed. There are more NA options, more mocktail options, more discussion around sobriety than there ever has been like 5 years, from 5 years ago. But there's still stigma. So I want to really normalize that we really, as a society, have to talk about this more, have to talk about normalizing sobriety, getting people help, not just sobriety help, but mental health help. And if we can do some of this, I really feel like we can break that stigma. More people can get help. More people can feel like I can talk to somebody. I am not alone. You're not alone. There's so many people that struggle with this, from binge drinking, social drinking, to everyday drinking. Alcohol can kind of get us at any age, any time in our lives. I've heard people that get divorces and they just kind of go downhill and have this just awful experience. They turn to alcohol and they get addicted. And it wasn't like something they planned for. It just happened. So I don't always think there's like this perfect scenario that we all have, right? Alcohol is tricky. But, we sometimes think what's wrong with us. And some of the programming that we've received growing up, it's not always like in our face. So I'll give you an example. I remember thinking sober people were boring. I remember thinking that's the case. Number one, my dad doesn't drink. I don't think my dad's boring, but for some reason I had this belief that sober people are boring without actually having evidence of that at all. So somewhere along the line, I learned it, saw it, something happened where it got planted in my brain and I believed it. And this is the tricky part. We believe things that we actually don't have facts for. This doesn't just go for drinking. This goes for many other things. But this is what sometimes we tell ourselves when we're trying to stop drinking is, what will people think of me? Um, you know, will they judge me? And this is not the person's fault, right? I don't blame anything I talk about today. I don't blame like people per se. I think it's an education moment for people. People have to learn this stuff and be taught it. Many of us grow up in alcohol culture. What I mean by that is alcohol is seen as part of being an adult. It really is. You're an adult, all adults drink. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you, figure it out, right? And that's a problem. It's a big problem because not enough people are getting help, right? So this is huge. So we really need to normalize it. And we also need to like look at our own narratives. Like if you think about not drinking, I can't tell you what to do. That's everyone has free will. But if you think about not drinking and you think about it over and over again, or alcohol's creating like this hole in your life and you're like, I know I need to stop. I think sometimes actually listening to yourself and going, okay, well, how do I do this? Or taking breaks, reading about it, whatever, you need to do. I encourage you to do those things because the longer we ignore what we want, the longer we won't have what we want, right? And I don't want to say this stuff is easy. By all means, this stuff is hard. So I want to go to like when I talk about alcohol culture is we often as children, for example, we do what our parents do, right? If a parent likes let's say a political figure, we probably will like that political figure because we hear it, see it. If you heard money grows on trees, you might believe it as an adult because your parents said it over and over again. So a lot of what we learn in our childhood shapes us. And so I remember seeing vodka advertisements when I was a kid. I don't think I'm sure I didn't think much of it at the time, but I saw it over and over again. I saw people having fun when they were drinking. I had a 13-year-old kid tell me that she couldn't wait to drink. It wasn't because she was drinking, it's because she saw that it looked fun. So we often associate drinking with fun. And it's not, most of us didn't actually experience it until we started drinking and then making our own assumptions about drinking. But this is why it's hard to break up with alcohol because we believe things without actually deciding if that's true. And it's not our fault. We've seen it over and over again. I saw a commercial of this guy drinking and driving, getting arrested, trying to say don't get a DUI, don't drive if you're intoxicated. The commercial, like literally immediately after, was a guy sitting at the bar looking all sexy with his whiskey drink. That commercial was significantly longer than the commercial before that, which is a problem. So it's telling you that drinking is sexy, and it's not that anyone's actually telling you in your ear. You're seeing it. It's painting a picture. It's showing emotional stuff to the things we see. So we believe it. We see that over and over and over and over again. And then when we're kids, there's drinking in kids movies. Like kids get like into this. And at least when I was a kid, no one told me that alcohol was like bad for you. I thought you can't drink if you have a problem, right? That was my belief system. And I had no information on alcohol. I didn't know how bad it was. And I don't know how it is in the schools now, but I doubt it's really talked about because then you have the parents calling in and so it's definitely a sensitive topic, for sure. But I want you to pay attention to signs at the bar, commercials, magazines. If you read magazines or even social media stuff, like I don't follow anybody that posts about alcohol all the time. Now, if someone has a picture of alcohol and it's one of my friends, I'm not like, of course, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying people that talk about it, like joke around about mommy wine culture and things like that, because to me, it's not the messaging I want to see, at all. So, but it took me a long time to understand that is what we see, what we get subject to, sometimes gets into our brains. Now it's called the subconscious, but so a lot of people don't actually know this is happening. So when they stop drinking, they're like, I can't have fun. But it's not like it's not necessarily that they're thinking like, oh, I'm missing out. They're feeling that feeling, but they don't know that they've been programmed to feel that. And it's alcohol is smart, man. Those companies, they get you. They get you. They want your money. They don't care. They want your money. And then there's a perceived benefit, right? Like, I need alcohol to have fun. I need alcohol to socialize. And so I need alcohol to relax. So there's this benefit we feel that sometimes we get from alcohol. And this took me a long time to rewire my brain to know that alcohol didn't help me with the thing I was wanting. That was hard. Like, so when I would go out in social events, a lot of people drank around me. So I was like the only sober one for a while. And everyone's having fun. And I'm like, oh, I want to have that fun too. And then I started feeling like I was missing out. So it took me time to be like, am I really missing out? What do I need today? Do I need support? Like, do I need to talk to somebody? What do I actually need in that moment? So it takes time to unwind these stories we've been told for a really long time. I didn't even know alcohol was that bad for you. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad until I read about it. Like, how many times have you seen that alcohol is good for your heart? Right? Like, have a glass of wine. How many people are just having a glass of wine? I'm sure there are some, of course, but the problem is that we don't hear the other stuff. We don't hear the links to cancer, the teeth decay, the kidney disease, the liver disease, um, all the other things, the heart, the actual issues that alcohol causes your heart. You don't hear that stuff, right? I mean, unless you look for it, it's not in the mainstream media for a reason. So that's why you have to educate yourself, because if we don't know that stuff, we won't know that stuff. And I don't think just knowing the statistics of alcohol is going to like make everybody stop drinking. Oftentimes it's helpful, but it's the mindset stuff that's the difficult stuff. And so I want to talk about some alcohol beliefs. So alcohol brings me down. How many of you want alcohol to relax, to feel good, right? I want to chill out after a stressful day. So we believe that alcohol actually helps with stress, right? Because you've seen it and heard it over 1,000 times. And alcohol does suppress your nervous system, but like long term, it actually does not relax you. It increases your cortisol levels. Your brain is spitting out millions of chemicals to try to get your body into a balanced state. And then your REM sleep gets destroyed. So at the end of the day, it actually doesn't do what you set out for it to do. And then you actually aren't coping with your stress in a helpful way, right? Like, you're not getting what you actually need. And therefore, it actually doesn't help with what you're wanting, right? We sometimes want to like escape life, but we can't really escape life, can we? It's not possible. In fact, it actually creates more turmoil long term because we're not actually dealing with anything. We're just, numbing out. Alcohol brings me up. That was mine, a huge one of mine. I mean, I sometimes definitely for stress, I drank too, but definitely for this one. Super fun. You can have so much fun. Look forward to Friday, Saturday nights, and it looks all good and fun. Brings me up, man, until it doesn't. And we'll talk about what we really need at the end of the day. So, social confidence. I told you about that, that 12-year-old girl. She's a shy girl. And what does alcohol do? Some people believe it makes them confident. You are giving all your power away to alcohol. I'm just going to state it as a fact, because this is the biggest thing that kind of made me go, oh my gosh. When I say all these things out loud, I'm giving my power away to alcohol. I'm saying I can't have fun without alcohol. I can't cope without alcohol. And again, I want to remind you, this is not your fault. We aren't taught these things and how to cope half the time. And we're taught that alcohol solves all the issues. So I don't want to blame people. It's a bigger thing than just a person, right? It's a messaging thing. It's a lie that we've been told so we could get, the alcohol companies can make lots of money. But social confidence, people are like, I needed to do this thing to be able to talk to all these people. And I'm like, oh man. So then you have to have alcohol. to do that, right? Or how many people have said they need alcohol to sleep when it doesn't actually help their sleep? It's the lies that we've been told along the way. We believe it. We don't question the things that we believe. And this is where you got to really question your thoughts around all this. So, social belonging. We want to all fit in, right? And what's the sure way to fit in is to drink like everybody else. One of the hardest things for me is to not drink like everybody else. It is easier to do what everybody else is doing in that moment because it just is. Removing alcohol and finding other ways to cope is hard. It is sometimes easier, doesn't mean it's better, to just do what everyone else does. But at the end of the day, that isn't often what we need, and it takes us away from actually the things that we actually really need as a human. But we all want to fit in, right? So it's much easier to do what the collective do, to drink. Status beliefs. So Sex in the City, have you ever watched Sex in the City? They're drinking their Cosmos and they look all sexy and they have tons of money. Actually, they don't have lots of money. I am sorry. You're going to buy shoes and not pay your rent. Come on now. What the heck? But I remember when I, used to get into wine a lot, I would talk a lot about all the wines, the notes, and smelling all the wines and knowing all the wines. So this huge belief, ooh, I'm super fancy, right? Yeah. And so when I stopped drinking, that, I don't want to say my identity was alcohol, but part of my identity was a wine drinker, a red wine drinker. People would send me things. So that's huge. So I believed that drinking wine was fun and fancy, even though it didn't always go so well for me. And oftentimes maybe very hungover. And then also the global beliefs. I know I talked a little bit about this earlier, but will they think I have a problem? Or all normal adults drink. So there's global beliefs that when we stop drinking, there's something wrong with us, or what are they going to think of us? And that can sometimes make us not want to break up with alcohol. And I want to explain again, this has been programmed in you for a lot of time, a long time for some of us. I'm not saying everybody has every one of these beliefs, but most people have at least one of them, if not more, because we've been programmed. And, when alcohol feels probably all this rush of dopamine right away, it feels really great for 20 minutes, and you got to keep drinking to keep that feeling up. And then if you keep drinking, it doesn't go well. So I want to also say why it's hard to break up with alcohol. We want to be perfect. We want it to have we want to be perfect when we decide to do what we want to do too. Well, I'm going to wait till September because I like summer and I want to keep drinking. Now, again, I'm not here to tell you what to do and when to do it. I'm just here to tell you that there will always be summers. There will always be weddings. There was never going to be a perfect time. And some people are so scared of not being perfect in this journey that why not start it, right? It's if I start it, what if I fail? Well, if you don't start it, you can never take action, correct? If you don't start something, you can't figure it out. I told you in my first episode, I drank after 6 months. I learned a lot. I was kind of mad at myself, to be honest with you, but I learned from it. And no, of course, no one wants to have a big downfall and do something awful. Yet at the same time, we have to understand that growth is sometimes not doing things perfectly, learning from the things we didn't do the way we wanted to do them, and figure it out and learn from that. So every time I drank during the times before I actually decided to get sober forever, I learned something every time. And it helped me get closer to sobriety. I'm working with one client and she's such an amazing soul, but it's taken her time to kind of figure some of this out. And it's not about, okay, I'm going to stop drinking, and then if I drink again, I suck. It's about, okay, I drank again, what did I learn? And obviously, everyone wants to stay sober, yet sometimes this stuff happens. And it's just part of the journey to get to where we need to be. But if you don't take any action at all, you're never going to see a change or a difference. You have to do something different. And when people try to stay sober or go on their sober journey and they don't try anything different, it often feels kind of awful. It does. And also, too, I want to talk briefly about your nervous system. Is that when we do things new and our body registers them as unfamiliar, it's seen as unsafe to our body. So we're trying to not drink, we're trying to cope with things we've not coped with potentially without alcohol. Our nervous system is probably rocked, right? Your body is probably like, help me. So there is truth in baby steps and doing one thing, then the next thing, and then the next thing. And so you got to just sometimes breathe, meditate, take a walk, do one thing at a time. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, sometimes it's really to take a break. And again, get help. Sometimes this stuff is really hard to do by yourself. And then the other stuff I want to talk about is why it's hard to stop drinking is coping. We all are not taught how to cope with things. So if I don't know how to cope with a stressful day other than drinking, and a lot of the people I work with and myself, I worked out, I took care of myself, but I was doing it sometimes not always in the best way. It was maladaptive sometimes. I work out because I want to look a certain way, right? Instead of going, no, I want to work out so I feel better. And I didn't do that all the time by any means, but we don't always know how to cope. And alcohol sometimes makes us blind to so much. So a lot of people have, well, most people actually have some type of trauma. Like, some people have bigger traumas, some people have, smaller traumas, but all of us come with a baggage and a childhood and things we've learned along the way. I'm not saying we're going to blame all of our parents and do all the things, but we often have a hard time healing if we don't have awareness. And, I could go into this a little bit further because this is such a huge topic. But if we don't feel good about ourselves, if we are cycling and we're in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn state all the time, and we're used to being in this high alert state and not knowing how to regulate our nervous systems, like I just talked about, if we've used alcohol in the past, we are going to crave alcohol. And so sometimes it's just that easy to grab something that we are familiar with because we don't know how to regulate ourselves. We've not been taught it. And this is why I always say this is not everybody's fault. We aren't taught coping skills for the most part. I'm sure some people are. Some parents teach them it. But our school system, obviously education is huge and important, but it's not, we don't talk about sometimes the things that are so important to children and to teenagers is how to do the things, how to calm ourselves, how to regulate ourselves, to understand our emotions. That our emotions, we let our emotions run the show sometimes, and we don't know how to get a handle on them. And we do what's easy, alcohol, right? And then the other thing too is, this is from my own experience, is that there's so much I didn't know until I stopped drinking. And this can happen. People are overwhelmed by their emotional state. Some people are like, Chrissy, my anxiety is better. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's the same. And you got to give your body time to process and get the alcohol out of your system. Depending on how much you drank, it could take longer for some people, shorter for some people. But we have to get a baseline. And keep in mind, we, some of our habits, like our anxiety and other habits, are also habitual, honestly. And I think it took me a long time to understand all this and understand that alcohol really blocks a lot of things. It took me to remove alcohol, to do things that expanded me. What I mean by that is grew me, like opening a business, starting this podcast. All that felt really uncomfortable for me. There's been times I wanted to drink again, quit. I don't think about drinking now, but when I first decided I'm getting sober forever, there were moments where I was like, God, it'd be so much easier to drink. I don't want to deal with this strong emotion. So it's figuring out strategies to work through that. And also, again, getting support along the way. If you're doing something very new, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's stretching our brains, and it's hard. really hard sometimes. So that can make going back to alcohol that much easier. Or you're lonely, right? You're lonely, you have nobody necessarily there. Like I was lonely in my sober journey in the beginning. I felt like I was by myself. It was really hard. And, I just felt like I was utterly alone. And I could tell you, you're not. There's a lot of people that are in the sober space. And so sometimes it really is reaching out to people that can get you and not judge you, frankly. And then we come up to the question too with coping sometimes is who are we without alcohol? A lot of people I meet are not in alignment with what they want, who they are, until they remove alcohol and work on themselves. So almost every single person I've come in contact with or unfulfilled in some, not every person, but like a lot of people are unfulfilled in some part of their lives or not living in a higher level of who they could become. So they're in jobs they love, potentially in a job they really enjoy, but they're not expanding enough in that job. They're scared to do the things that they truthfully really want to do because they're scared they're going to fail, they're going to blow up, things are going to get worse for them, so they don't do them. And again, and then we might have a little bit of trauma added to that. And it's just that much easier to think about alcohol. Because again, that's what we've done for a long time. If you've drank for 20 plus years, I want you to understand that removing alcohol and staying sober isn't going to happen, or at least enjoying sobriety too, isn't going to necessarily always happen overnight. It's going to take time to rewire your brain. It does take time. Everyone's different too. I can't say like it's going to take you 2 months, but some people it happens faster. Some people it takes more time. So I don't think there's like this one perfect solution for every single person on the planet Earth. But I do think there are some things that I've noticed, especially with women, is I do talk about people pleasing a lot because I see a lot of women doing this. I did it myself. And they want to make everybody happy, and it was something they probably learned when they were a kid to kind of keep things cool, keep the peace. I got to keep things sane. It was their coping strategy at that time. So that's the other thing. Some of our coping strategies we've learned are also not helpful because they're not coping strategies that are in alignment with what we need. And I have to say, between hustle culture and alcohol culture, it's hard to know what we want. We don't practice mindfulness. And I know this is like this buzzword, but it's truthfully sometimes spending some parts of the day going, why do I feel this crappy? Or why do I feel so stressed? Or let me take some deep breaths in and chill out. Let me take some deep breaths and relax. So sometimes it's journaling. What do I need? Why am I anxious? What's up? And I have to say, when we remove alcohol, the craziest things happen. In my journey, I was shocked. I've had the hardest time, figuring some of this out. And it took me really, really to go on the alcohol-free journey to get to where I'm at now. I'm still growing and I'm still working on myself every day. I think the other thing is people think if I get sober, my life's going to be perfect. And they get sober and they're like, okay, well, life's not perfect. What the hell? And I have to tell you that it's sobriety is wonderful, but you got to work on yourself, right? You got to figure out the gaps, but you have to be in alignment with who you are. And I think the first steps is removing alcohol and then kind of figuring out what you want to do. For some of you, you might know this, you might not. I do coach people, but I urge you to get some level of support if you're not. That could come in many different forms. I also want to say that I run a group that's going to be starting in a couple weeks. It's Soulful and Sober Purpose Blueprint. I help people on their journey to figure out who they want to become now that they are really committing to sobriety. And what that means is that you're done with drinking. It's not what you want, but you need to get over the feeling like you're missing out or feeling like it doesn't feel as good as it was supposed to feel. And so part of that might be healing something that's there, right? I see it a lot where people are like, I feel so awful. And it's trying to figure out, well, why do you feel awful? And sometimes we got to work on all these things to get to this next level, So I find a lot of purpose doing what I'm doing now, doing this, talking about sobriety. I felt like my throat chakra was blocked when I wasn't talking about it. I didn't have a platform or voice to talk about it. I felt very trapped. Do I know exactly how all of this is going to play out? No. But if I don't do what's tugging in my soul, and one day I'm not here, we none of us have a crystal ball. None of us have a crystal ball in life, but what we do have is ourselves. And what we do have is other people to help us along the way. So if you feel called, I would love for you to talk with me more about the group. I'll link it below. But I also want to know that people really, I want you to love what you're doing. I want you to be excited about what you're doing in life. This is what makes us more fulfilled. This is what makes us feel having, true meaning. And it doesn't mean that you have to be unhappy or miserable in your life, but typically alcohol blocks something. There is something that it's blocking. Maybe it's your growth, your career, your relationships, maybe even being a different parent. Like there is something that it blocks. And I've seen it over and over and over again. I've experienced it myself in different ways, But I urge you to go on this journey. I urge you to trust yourself enough. And honestly, at the end of the day, only you know what you're ready for. But at the very least, dabble and learn. And, you know, it's something that's hard to do. Breaking up with alcohol is hard, but it's possible. It's possible. And these are some of the things that I talk about with a lot of my clients, the things that I talked about today, because I like to really reduce shame and normalize everything they're going through. Because A, I've been through a lot of it, and B, it feels good when we don't feel like alone. And we know, oh, that's why that's happening. It's not because we're broken, because there's something wrong with us. It's more like we just didn't know this was going on. So we can't make something better if we don't know it's happening. We just can't. When we don't have awareness, we don't know. And honestly, a lot of people actually know what they want when I talk to them. They just aren't aware of it. And so that's why sometimes getting support in one, two, whatever ways possible that you think is good for you is important. Because if we don't know that we feel unworthy, we don't know that we don't believe in ourselves. And before I wrap up, I just want to tell you, I've had so many people come to me and say, oh, you wrote a book. I've written 3, but I published 2 kids' books. And people are like, I can't write a book. And I'm like, do you think I could write a book when I did it? I had to learn a couple things. I took a course on how to actually the fundamentals of children's books because I knew nothing about it. And I had help along the way. I had somebody help me edit it. Like most of us need an editor. I don't know any author that doesn't get their book edited. And yeah, maybe, I'm not an English major, but I also think if I tell myself that, I'll never write a book. So when people tell me I can't do that, I'm like, why? Who told you that? You? Society? Who told you you can't do what you want to do? And this is where we then don't do the things that we're like, wow, maybe we could do that. And then we could do this other thing. And we could do this other thing. And we let time and instant gratification limit us, right? We don't do the thing because it's not happening tomorrow. And we're terrified that we're going to fail at it, or it's not going to be good, or we're not smart enough, we're too old. Whatever limiting belief you have to look at that and say, is that really true? Or have I told myself this because it's safe and easy? I can tell you from my experience, it's hard to do these things, but it's so much more gratifying and so much more exciting, and makes alcohol not that exciting when you actually do the things that light you up. I have now believed if I drink again, I will never get anything I want in my life. I will tell the story over and over again because it's true. I went from missing out on alcohol to now thinking if I drink again, I'll never get anything I want. Because I wasn't getting the things I wanted when I was drinking. I didn't know that. I had no freaking clue. I am going to wrap up because I think that's a good place to stop. I will link some things below for you guys. I hope you know that you're amazing and this journey is expansive and it's hard and there's so many emotions, but it's so worth it at the end of the day. And if I could tell you anything before I end this is don't do this alone. Don't do this alone. There are so many avenues to get support, some that don't cost money, some that do, whatever feels in line with you and what you want to do. And please always feel free to reach out to me. I am always here for you guys. I hope everybody has a wonderful day.